And I was just shocked by some people in the room who had just, were embarrassed to talk about this. And for some, some younger men in the room, they hadn't even heard of this. I think, as you said earlier, people associate it with the hot flashes, but not actually understanding the true symptoms and the effect that it does have, and depression is probably one of the earliest symptoms that a lot of women go through.
Welcome to the Hope Warrior Project podcast, where we bring you an extra dose of hope to help you get over the humps of life. I'm Stephanie Martino.
And I'm Lydia Zuniga, and together we are bringing you real stories of hope from real people. We believe by hearing other people's stories of challenge and transformation, we can all gain some hope for ourselves.
So if you've been looking to find and hold on to hope, you're in the right place. Join us on this journey as we all become warriors of hope. Okay, y'all, today we are talking about menopause. Now, I know some of you may think this topic doesn't apply to you, but stay with me here for just a minute. Now, men, I'm going to start with you. Obviously, you yourself won't be going through menopause, but if you have a wife or girlfriend, a mother, a sister, a daughter, or female friends or coworkers, then this is something you'll probably want to know a bit about. That is, if you care about these women in your life, which I'm going to assume you do. Now, for the women listening, this definitely applies to you, even if you're still very young and many years away from entering this stage of life, because understanding how it could affect you will better prepare you when it's your time. Now, I don't want to scare you or myself for that matter, but menopause usually lasts between 5 and 15 years and starts between the ages of 45 and 55. But the thing is, symptoms of menopause can vary drastically from one woman to another, even women within the same families. So you may be wondering why we're talking about this on our podcast. Well, we want to bring more understanding to the fact that menopause can impact a woman's mental, emotional, and physical well-being, and at times can even make her feel like she is literally going crazy. This can feel like a very hopeless time. And the thing is, many women still aren't comfortable openly sharing about it. So today, we want you to hear some real life experiences from a woman who has been living in it, but also took the initiative to find healthy ways of managing her symptoms. Sara is with us today. She is actually a former colleague of mine and is joining us all the way from London. So Sara, welcome to our show. Thank you so much for being willing to share your experiences with our audience.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yes, Sara, thank you so much for joining us. I really enjoyed our last conversation. And as Stephanie was saying, even though people might hear menopause and think, oh, that doesn't apply to me at all, or it doesn't apply to me yet. I think that just from our last discussion, there's a lot of things that we talked about that people will be able to take away and use for really any challenge that they might be facing now or that might be coming up in the near future. So, and then also, as I mentioned to you last time, I remember when my mother was going through menopause and she really struggled through it. She had an added circumstance of dealing with mental illness to begin with. So she was on medications, and then all of a sudden the medications weren't working, right? Because your chemistry is all thrown off. So it was definitely a big thing in my household, but I was so young that I was just, I couldn't wrap my mind around it. And, we haven't figured out a way to call heaven yet, so I can't talk to her about it. So I'm really interested in this topic and can't wait to hear what you're going to share with our community. Just knowing that menopause affects women in so many different ways, can you just give us, paint the picture of what it was like for you?
Sure, happy to. So for me, I was 50 when I started having the most bizarre symptoms. And I say bizarre because I did not know what was going on. I was totally unprepared. for this feeling. And actually, last Saturday, when I was thinking about this podcast, I went through a journal and I found a page that I'd written to myself at that time. And I'll just quote some things, if I may, from that very quickly. So I'd written this, little spider diagram with me in the middle. And some of the words that I put off of this diagram were useless, scared, cannot cope, what will I do? I'm feeling helpless, I'm paranoid, I'm having panic attacks, I'm having hot flashes, I'm crying so much. Why am I feeling so scared? How long will this last? And why is this happening to me at the age of 50? And when I think back to that period in my life, sorry, excuse the pun, because the periods finish as well. But when I think back to that period, I just didn't know what was happening to me and the impact that this phase, this natural phase in a woman's life, we all go through this. And as Stephanie just said, to varying degrees, some people sail through it. I've had friends that sail through it, but I had no idea how that would affect my sleep, for instance. The insomnia was just dreadful. Memory problems, how moody I was, and just this roller coaster of emotions, which had such an impact on my self-confidence. I feel myself just, getting really emotional just thinking about that, about the times that I just used to cry and just used to feel so worthless and so just despair of what can I do about this. And it was just a very, very tough period in my life. And with working full time and having a daughter, a husband, there's a lot to juggle. We all know that. We're all juggling so much, but having to deal with these anxieties on top of everything can really, well, it certainly put me on a tipping edge, and I know it's put a lot of other women in that place as well.
When we talked previously, you also mentioned, I think when you were driving to work one morning, how just kind of your mental state, how it affected that. Can you share that story?
Sure, yeah. So, on the days that I could drive to work when I wasn't working at home, I only had a 30-minute commute, bit down a motorway, pretty early in the morning. And I'm a confident driver, been driving since the age of 17. And this one particular morning, and I think we've all done it, we all go on autopilot at times. And I was concentrating. I was thinking about my day ahead, as we all do as we drive into the office at the time. And this van just pulled out in front of me, and it was literally a near miss. And it shook me up so much that, there was no accident. I was very fortunate. Nobody was hurt. There was no accident. A couple of other drivers sort of spotted what had happened, and I saw one car drive by and sort of give me a bit of a reassuring smile, sort of saying, "Are you okay?" And this van just sped off into the distance and left me feeling, oh my gosh, so shaky. And I was literally sobbing. And I got to the car park at work and parked the car and went into the office, and I was just an emotional wreck. And I think at that point, I was just totally irrational feelings. I was fine. The car was fine. Nobody was injured, but coping with it at that time was so tough for me. That feeling of panic and anxiety, dashing into the ladies' bathroom and just sobbing was and then finally, so I used to go into the office early. Somebody came in and sort of like, "Are you okay?" And sort of just breaking down in front of them. But it was when I reflected on that, that wasn't usual behavior. If I did that now, it would be like, oh my gosh, crazy driver. But thinking back, that was how I coped with my emotions at that time.
Yeah, or didn't cope, right? I guess.
Absolutely didn't cope. Yeah, absolute. Yeah, in so many tears, was unbelievable.
Right. It's interesting. I mean, and thank you for sharing the vulnerable feelings that you were feeling, because again, I think there's so much lack of awareness and understanding of what menopause can actually cause. I think, even me growing up, I thought, oh, menopause, hot flashes. That's what menopause meant to me, right? And so obviously it's so much more than that. It has such a huge impact on other areas and just the daily life, and how normal things that happen in life can affect us at such a deeper, more emotional level. So I think your examples really help demonstrate that.
Yeah.
And I think too, as you were talking, I was thinking about, other examples of, people who have maybe struggled with other kind of mental well-being situations, right? And some of what you described, I think, is very similar to how they could be feeling even if they don't have menopause, right? So it really just kind of connects this idea of our mental well-being can be impacted by so many different ways.
Yeah.
But it can feel very similar depending on what it's impacted or what's impacting it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we, so one of the things that we did in the organisation that I still work in was, we've been conducting some mental wellbeing training, champion training. And I know the first time I went along to that, I was absolutely thrilled, because right there up in black and white for me, the menopause was highlighted. And I was just shocked by some people in the room who had just, were embarrassed to talk about this. And for some, some younger men in the room, they hadn't even heard of this. I think, as you said earlier, people associate it with the hot flashes, but not actually understanding the true symptoms and the effect that it does have. And depression is probably one of the earliest symptoms that a lot of women go through with the menopause. And in fact, here in the UK, a lot of women, I know this for a fact from women I've spoken to, when they've gone to visit their doctor and describe their symptoms, the doctor, because has a lack of knowledge about the menopause, will just want to put these women on antidepressants. And it just goes to prove how important it is for me to really understand that impact, and to understand what you can do about it personally.
So let's talk a little bit about that then. What did you do? What did you find helped you manage through and cope better with some of the challenges?
Yeah. So for me, I wanted to find out more. So I did research. I literally started researching things and finding that a lot of the things I was reading about were quite inconsistent. And I think as it is with some things, there's a lot of conflicting advice out there. And because I think the menopause affects women in so many different ways, the issue becomes that what works for one woman may not work for another. So I felt quite challenged by the research. And at the time, especially here in the UK, and I know there's some great role models in the US as well. I know Michelle Obama has done an amazing interview about how her menopause affected her. But all of a sudden, here in the UK, this started to get the attention within the media. And people started talking about their own experiences. And I found that comforting, to be able to understand what other women were going through and relating that to my own experience. I think the other thing that I did at that time as well to manage my own challenges was to reach out and sought professional help. So by going to my doctor and discussing options and understanding, and I think the first doctor I went to knew very little about the menopause, and having the confidence to not be satisfied with that and seek further guidance was something that I really strove to do. And I finally found a doctor who, I can just picture now being in the surgery with her, and I was at breaking point, and her saying to me, "You do not need to continue like this. There are options for you. We will discuss those options. I hear you, I understand you," and that just helped immensely. And for me at the time, I made a personal decision to go on to HRT. I know that's not for everybody, and I'd say to anybody listening, do your research into it. For me, it worked. It was a game changer for me. It just helped level my hormones.
So real quick, HRT, not everybody may know what that means.
Sorry, yep, good point. We're good at acronyms. Hormone replacement treatment. Yeah, so hormone replacement treatment is when we're putting some hormones back in our body, which is lacking, typically estrogen. And certainly there have been issues and links in the past which have said that there could be increased risk to breast cancer. So there was a big scare in the UK, particularly because people were thinking, what impact is that going to have on me? Which has since been found that there are not those impacts. The other big thing that I did was spoke to other women at work. Working for a multinational organization where there was a lot of women in the office where I worked, it was talking to other women, and I created an informal women's support group. And we would get together and share experiences and support each other. I'd bring in what I'd found from a research perspective, and just gave people the opportunity to talk about it with each other. It's funny though, even some of those women who came to those sessions, like I'd send it out in the diary as menopause support group, and some women were so embarrassed to have that show up in their calendar because other people in their teams could access their calendars, and they would change the title of it or make it a private appointment because there's such a stigma about it, because this is such a taboo subject. So I hope by creating this informal support group that we try to reduce some of that stigma, and we really supported each other through these journeys.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. And as you were talking through it, I think it's just human nature to just think about how it relates to our own circumstances. And I could see so much of my story in what you just said, that you started out with the research. When I was facing a big challenge in my life, that's definitely what I did. I went to books. I went online, I watched TED Talks, and I wanted to know everything about what I was experiencing. And I wanted to go to people that said they knew the answers, right? That they had something of value to contribute. And then going to the doctor, right? Asking for help, going to the professionals. That's another huge thing that I feel is so hard to do sometimes, because then you have to admit that you have this problem or that you're facing this challenge. And that feels vulnerable. And also just not even knowing if the doctor really knows what you need, and being able to navigate that whole situation. And then the community is what I connect with the most, because that's why Hope Warrior exists, is because when I was going through my challenge, what lifted me up the most was talking to other people and finding other people that were going through the same types of things. And that just gave me so much hope. So yeah, although we are talking about menopause, it's this thread that runs through all challenges, right? That these things help with everything that we might be facing. So now can you just go into, I guess, what you learned through this experience that you're, still applying today, and how that's looking in life today.
Yeah, sure. And I think what you were just describing there as community, that just helped me, and I learned so much. And there's something about, as you say, it doesn't, not just about menopause, it's about, what is, everyone's got something going on in their life. We should never make assumptions. We should never presume that somebody has something going on or somebody doesn't have something going on. It's really about talking. It's really about genuinely listening to others. And I found by listening to other women and really understanding what they were going through helped immensely. And realizing that everyone is so individual, and particularly around a lot of the symptoms, because there's such a diverse range of symptoms that what works for your friend just may not work for you. So just the importance of talking about it to others was just helped me massively. And I think that really links in with educating others. So as I mentioned earlier, I have a 16-year-old daughter, and educating her about the menopause, hopefully, we can really help future generations of women feel prepared and understand the changes that they're going to go through around this time, as well as empowering them to seek help if things are getting bad. That's the stigma, that's the motto that I want to create. And I was thrilled last year and actually signed a petition in the UK here for the menopause to be included within the education syllabus at schools, because it just wasn't mentioned at all. And how fantastic that we can talk about it so openly. So that's a big thing for me, is educating others as well, and helping empower people. Be prepared. I'd hate to think of anyone else in the same situation where you just don't know what's going on, and there is this peri-menopause stage that you can go through, which is just before the menopause, and that's your body telling you that it's getting ready for the full menopause. And a very good friend of mine went through this at the age of 45, and it was only by having conversations with me that she actually thought, this is what it is. It was her peri-menopause. So again, it's just talking about it and understanding. And then the big other thing for me was around meditation. I just felt that helped immensely. I've gone on to become a meditation coach. I run sessions for colleagues. I'm passionate about it, but actually practicing and breathing just helped me so much. I can remember being on an aeroplane a couple of Christmases ago and having so many hot flashes, and actually sitting there and closing my eyes and listening to a meditation just helped me immensely and helped get me through things. So there are practical things that you can do, but there's a lot that I've learned that's really helped me.
Can I just say that you have the perfect voice to be like a guide for meditation? Like if you start your own like guided meditation CD, or not, I guess it wouldn't be a CD now, but whatever they call it. If you put out a program, like I could totally see myself listening to it. Like your accent and you're just have this calm energy about you that could definitely be like a big thing for you. I could see that.
Oh, that's so lovely. Thank you. Well, watch this space. It's definitely something that I've got on my agenda in the next couple of months, because yeah, I just love it. It just gives me so much passion, and yeah, it's super.
That's awesome. Yeah, you're right, Lydia. I mean, she does have just that soothing voice, which is helpful when you're doing the meditation. Actually, when you were talking about meditation, I've tried to do some myself, and I was telling Lydia this the other day, like it really takes practice to do it. I was doing one where, I was trying to really pay attention to what the coach was saying. And if they paused for a few minutes, for me to think about something or to breathe, I found my mind wandering very quickly. So I just want to say that, like, anyone that's new to meditation, that will happen, right? Don't get discouraged. It's something that you have to keep practicing to get better at.
It is a practice. Definitely, Stephanie, it is a practice. And the sessions that I run every week, I always say that to people. It is a practice. And some days it works and some days it may not. But that mind wandering is very natural. And it's how we just take that mind wandering back to our breath and focus on our breath.
Yeah. So really, really great advice. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I don't know that I would have ever thought about meditation being something that could help with some of this. So I know you, and based on our previous conversation, you had actually put together, I think, maybe some guidelines for, at your company, at our company, that I was at as well, to help women, kind of understand what they can do. So for women, particularly in the workplace who may be experiencing menopause, what would you recommend? What are some of those tips and guidelines that you put together?
Yeah. So I was, when I went through this journey myself, and I have been in human resources for a number of years, and there was nothing really. There was there's flexible working policies out there, but there was nothing out there that spoke openly about the menopause. So I sort of took charge in this area and had such a passion to actually deliver some global guidelines. And I think my research found that, especially within the workplace, actually being supportive can make such a big difference. Talking about symptoms, with trusted colleagues, and sometimes using a bit of humor to deflect that embarrassment can really help. So some of the tips that I gave and some of the things that I included in the guidelines. So as I mentioned a moment ago, the flexible working policy, particularly if you're suffering terribly from insomnia. There was one lady in particular who was really suffering badly, and it helped her to have a conversation once I encouraged her to do so with her line manager, and have agreement with her line manager that she could work at home on a Wednesday. And she just found that having that day in the week when she knew, it just took that pressure off her. And she found in particular that she'd wake up in the early hours, and she said her mind was like whizzing. And so that's when she sat down, and she said she had some of the most productive, creative times. But obviously come the afternoon, she was exhausted. But by working from home, she could adjust that. And with the support of her line manager, it was a win-win for both of them. I think technology reminders really help. This brain fog that you go through, this autopilot where you just can't remember certain things, and there is research around it, and it can have a huge impact on how you're feeling. And so having things like, for me, it's the reminders, it's the notes on my phone, it's the alarms, things that will all help me, particularly when I was making presentations or having meetings. So trying to use technology to its best advantage really was just a game changer for me. Relaxation technique. So I just mentioned the meditation. I formed this meditation group at work, and that only helped me, but helped others as well. And then I think it was just talking to line managers and saying to line managers that it's often making a few simple changes to a working environment can make a world of a difference to an individual. And even just talking openly about the menopause, that can just reduce that impact of some of the symptoms, and will just help people feel better. So having honest, authentic, open conversations is something, yeah, we'd want every line manager to do that, right? And it goes back to what we were saying earlier. It doesn't have to be if you're suffering from the menopause. It's whatever's going on for you in your life. You want a line manager to be supportive, to be authentic, and to really understand what you're going through and support you. So that is just so important.
And it is, I mean, oh, sorry. I was just thinking that it is, the person that's going through it, it is obviously your responsibility to take this to your line manager. But I think it also is important for managers and, other people in the workplace to also be aware of this and maybe even ask, how they can support, the team member, knowing that there's still a lot of, I don't know if I want to say taboo or whatever, but people are not as open and talking about it, right? And so there may be some women who are very hesitant to have that conversation. So from like a manager perspective or an HR perspective, starting that conversation or just putting it out there, knowing that this is a fact of life. How can we support you if and when you would be going through this?
Yeah, definitely. And I think for some individuals, they, especially UK support group, they were so embarrassed to talk to people about it and so reluctant to talk to their line managers about it. So I always would say to individuals, especially to line managers, the conversation should be employee led, but the managers should focus on making the environment easy for having that conversation. And that's the key for me. If you're supportive and you're making it easy, then that person's going to relax. They're going to want to open up. They're going to want to share and share their own vulnerabilities and how it's affecting them.
Yeah, and I was also going to say that something that I struggle with is just speaking up about what I need because I don't want to inconvenience someone else. And so I feel like this is right in line with that, like we just think I have to deal with it. Like, this is my job. I have to do it as I've done it before. And this is just a fact of life. And I just have to kind of suffer in silence and figure it out. Right. But that might not always be the case. Like you showed your example of the woman that went to her manager and they were able to figure out that she can take one day at home and how it made all the difference. And my husband's a manager, and I think about the conversations that he has with his team, and he wants that transparency of like, what do you feel is holding you back, and let's figure out a game plan so that you can stay effective, and as a person with the quote unquote problem or challenge, like we think it's an inconvenience, but really when you put it on the table and you look at it together and figure out how to work around it, that's way more beneficial to the company, right? Because you're being honest and you're not just letting your work suffer silently and nobody knows what's going on and why. So I think that's like a huge point too, and something that I need to work on as well. It's just knowing like your value as a person, and that if you're open and honest, like it'll always lead to progress, right? So this has been great. And a question that we've been asking all of our guests is, without thinking about our project or anything, what does the term hope warrior mean to you?
Yeah, I had a little think about this one, and I think for me, it's about somebody, and the concept is sort of like embarking on a journey with optimism, and the word bravery stood out for me, and not being scared to understand what's going on and not being scared to talk about it. That's what I think it really means for me. So genuinely having this strong desire for wanting things to change for the better, and hopefully by sharing my story about the menopause, my wishes, it'll give others hope to talk about their own situation and really recognize that it can be tough, it can be hard for people, but giving people the hope to understand that things can improve, that there's certain things, we talk about that are in our control and certain things that are not in our control. And I think being a hope warrior is being on a journey and knowing what you can control and being brave and having the courage about it.
I love that. And I love that we're asking this question because it is so fascinating to hear each individual's, the meaning that they take from it. So I love it. Thank you for sharing that. It just gives me goosebumps.
You're welcome.
So Sara, if someone, I will say anyone out there that has related to your story and is maybe going through this right now, or maybe has a friend or family member that is going through it and they would want to connect with you further, is there a way that they could do that?
Yeah, sure, Stephanie, I'm more than happy. So LinkedIn, I think, would be the best possible way to connect with me. Not been probably that active recently, but it's a great way, I think, of connecting. And I'd be more than happy for people to reach out to me and share my experiences. And, if you're working in an organization and you're thinking, gosh, we need some menopause guidelines, I'm happy to share some advice and tips about that as well. And then hopefully I'll be able to share some more information about the meditation as well when I've got that up and running, because I said earlier, that's something that I'm just passionate about too.
Well, thank you so much, Sara, for sharing your story and the lessons you've learned and being vulnerable with us. We really, really appreciate it. And we know that it's helping people, making an impact. And for those of you listening, thank you for listening. And we will have another story for you next week.
Thank you for joining us today. Go take a listen to our other episodes. We think you'll be encouraged and inspired by what you hear.
Are you interested in sharing your story of hope on this podcast? Contact us at hopewarriorproject@gmail.com. We'd love the opportunity to help you share your story.